Hi, everyone. Welcome to The Story That Built Her. I am thrilled to be with you. And this is the show where we're going to go beyond the highlight reel, beyond what most people share on social media, because we want to get to the real, raw stories, the powerful ones that actually shaped women who are starting a business, running a business, multiple businesses, family, all of the things. And I want you to know that we can't just talk about the wins because our lives were not built just by our wins. They were built and we became who we are because of our wounds, because of our wisdom, and because of the wild ride that life actually is. So we know that behind every business, behind every brand, book, there is a story. And we are here to tell those stories. So I want to welcome our very first guest in this series, Criss Madrigal. Hi, Criss. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. Thank you for
Thanks
having
for,
me.
thanks for being willing to go and to go first. I mean, I wouldn't expect anything different from a 3-5. So, Criss, I know that you are actually celebrating a 1-year anniversary of quitting your corporate job. And I would love for you to sort of take us back to when you had a completely different life. What did your life look like when you were in corporate?
Well, I have to start off by saying that you are correct. Today, specifically, is 1 year from leaving corporate. And so I just want to say that, I am Criss Madrigal, a woman who is living the most powerful chapter of her life today. And oh my gosh, what was my life before? My life in corporate was one where I was checking the boxes. I was doing what I thought I had to do. And at some point along that 20-year journey, I ended up not recognizing myself in the mirror, right?
Mm.
And so it's not one specific moment, but it was an accumulation of moments of working a full-time job, being a mother, traveling, coming home to the family, having zero energy, and ultimately leading to burnout, to health conditions, to a moment where I no longer recognize the person in the mirror.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's huge when because it's gradual, isn't it? It's like, it's rarely one thing. It's usually a million little things over time. Mm.
It definitely is. And I think that's the case for so many people. I would say the majority of the people, where we continue to stack one thing after the other, especially when you're trying to check all the boxes that society imposes on us somewhere pulled out of nowhere, right? I say out of nowhere, but we know where, structures and stuff. But it's like, you go to an education and you go to college and you get married and you're like checking all the boxes. So you are thinking that you're doing everything that you're supposed to do, but in that process, you're forgetting who you really are.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, it's true. It's easy to think like this is just what you do at this age. This is what you do, and then after that, you do this thing, and then you go do the next thing. Do you think it's fair to ask women to have a full-time corporate career, like you said, all of the things, right? The long hours, the travel, the demands, be a mother, be a wife, and still be able to maintain who she is and be healthy and happy? Do you think all of that can go together?
I don't know. There may be some superwoman out there, and so many, there are many, right, that are doing that exact thing. But somewhere along the path, you are abandoning someone, and that someone is yourself. Because as a woman, especially as mothers, we're in a time where having careers is important. People, majority, not everybody, but want to have a family and a beautiful home where they envision all this beautiful things, and the family and the kids and spending time together and going on vacations and all these wonderful things. But if you really sit back and just like open that curtain, that's not happening. People are exhausted. They want to thrive in their career. They're wanting to climb up the ladder in many cases, because climbing up the ladder means additional income. And that additional income means I can have those other experiences that I so much long for. But in that process, the only person that you're abandoning is yourself, because you're pouring yourself out to everyone else except yourself. And there's some that know how to do that dance very well, but the majority of people don't. And the ones that do are probably because somewhere along the line, they had an experience that likely broke them and made them realize that they had to go back within and really identify what it is that they truly desired in their life. And there's so many people in that space today that are exhausted, trying to hold every title and crumbling inside.
Woo, holding every title and crumbling inside. Can you give us an example of when you became aware that you were abandoning yourself and that you were getting lost in all of this?
Yeah. You know, I there's certain memories that come to me that, you know, when I'm asked that question, that really kind of stand out. And it's really the never-ending cycle of feeling exhausted, right? Trying to be everything for everyone except myself. And for those that don't know, I spent 20 years in corporate HR. I was in human resources, where I was required to hold space for others, right? And do it in a way that is empathetic and leading. And, you know, that was an area that required a lot of energy. And while I was very good about leaving it at work, there was a whole other piece of coming home. And I remember I would get home, I would park in the driveway, and I would sit there trying to figure out where I was going to get the energy to walk through that door and be received by my children, you know, who are just desperately waiting for mom, because she's been away for hours and maybe even days, because my job required me to travel, right? When I would sit in hotels at night and cry because my kids were crying over the phone because they wanted mom, right? So it's just this never ending cycle that even almost gets me emotional. I could kind of feel it, because there's so many people in that space, right? Where you don't have the energy to do the things that you really desire to do, right? And I have this memory of, it was a Sunday, and I got my kids ready, and my 3 kids and I went to church, and my husband stayed behind. And I asked him, you know, I put some roast in the oven, turned the oven off when the timer beeps. And he did exactly what I told him to do, except I didn't time it well. So when I got home and the kids were hungry and I wanted to feed them and the roast wasn't cooked, I lost it. That little thing made me lose it. And I said things that I regretted instantly, very likely. And if you know my husband, he's a very calm person. And he just said, either you go for a walk or I do. And I was like, no, I'm going for a walk. I need to get out of the house. But what did I do? I walked myself into the laundry room and started to do the things that I needed to do, the piles of laundry. As I sat there and just sobbed in disbelief of where my life was, of where I found myself. And I want to say it was at that point that I knew something had to change, because that lifestyle had led me to be a version of myself that I no longer recognized, that I didn't like. And over time, that same lifestyle developed into an autoimmune condition.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's the thing, right? The body at some point starts talking, starts screaming, and will refuse to keep going. So tell us about how did this autoimmune disease develop? How did it first show up to you?
Yeah. So I remember I was like, a midlife crisis. I remember it was my 40th birthday, and we had rented a boat with about 20 friends to go out to the lake and celebrate. And I was looking at my body, and I was covered in hives. And I did not know how my body was going to react to the sun. You know, it was a lot of discomfort. But at that moment, I was covered. And I thought it may have been some supplements that I started drinking because I was feeling fatigued, like I need energy. All these things were happening. But when I stopped all those supplements and everything, and it continued, I didn't know what it was. But I was just covered in hives. And I'm like, I had a midlife crisis. Oh my gosh. But I began to do what I know how to do very well, and is advocate and go to doctors and get the support that I need. And I do that very well because I did it for my children, for my daughters. And I went to doctor after doctor. Nothing's wrong with you. I mean, I consulted 5 different specialists, allergists, immunologists. I mean, you name it. Test after test, where they prick your back over 100 times.
Oh my gosh.
And everything came back normal. And the last doctor said, well, just drink 5 Allegra a day. And Allegra is, excuse me, an allergy pill that on the bottle says you drink one every 24 hours.
Oh, wow.
And he said, if it ever flares up, you can drink up to 5 a day. And that didn't sit well with me. And if you know me well, you know that I don't give up that easily. So I continued, and I ended up seeking or opting, for alternative or holistic medicine. But the journey from when it started to when I got there was a very long journey of trying to identify what was wrong with me. And I recall sitting in the practitioner's office, sobbing. Some things that happened, I laugh now, but it's not funny. But some things had happened, where we got hacked multiple times in a short period of time. And one of our bank accounts was completely wiped out. And I'm just like, how is all this happening? And I'm sitting there sobbing. And that practitioner was just looking at me, right? And she let me do my thing, let it all out. And then she just looked at me and said, Criss, you've been living in survival mode for over a decade. And this is how your body is speaking to you. And it's speaking to you loudly. And that comment really stopped me on my tracks, right? Because it was almost like a sense of relief to know that I had some answers, that my body was breaking out in hives because I'd been living in survival mode, because motherhood had been a very stressful period, because we have daughters that were born with twin daughters, I should say, that were born with a 22q deletion syndrome diagnosis that required a lot of medical needs. And there was a lot of attention that was poured into them and our son, who wasn't even 2 when they were born. And so when I lost myself in motherhood, it's because I was pouring myself out to my children, advocating, making sure that they were okay, especially our girls, but then our son, who, we were trying to make sure everybody got the right attention. And it all made sense to me once she started explaining it to me. So it was a relief that I finally got some answers, happy to find the root cause after years, and simultaneously sad to know how much I had abandoned myself to the point that it took my body to a state of dis-ease, right?
Mm.
But when she told me that, I mean, it was, I was very happy in a weird kind of way, right? But I remember looking at her and I said, well, if I caused this problem, then I'll make sure to fix it in record time as well. And so I followed everything that I was told to do, which was very difficult in its time. And in 6 months, I was healed.
Wow.
And that journey really allowed me to become familiar with my body and to begin to learn how my body speaks to me.
Mhm.
And so, for anyone who's listening, when you are starting to feel things, when diseases start to form, don't just dismiss them as this is hereditary or this just runs in my family or it's this or it's stemming from the inside. Something is not energetically aligned. And this is how our body speaks to us. And so, yes, I do believe there's things that we inherit, but there's things that you can change.
Yeah.
And it really saddens me when I hear people, you know, say that it's like, okay, they have something. Oh, this is just, it just runs in my family. Like, okay, they accept it for what it is. They take it, but you know what? It doesn't necessarily belong to you. You're in control and you can change it.
Yeah.
But you have to change it up here. It's a
Mm.
mindset shift. And I decided that I was going to embody health and that I knew it wasn't going to be easy. I was going to do it because that is what my body was asking me to do. And I was going to honor it if I wanted to come out of this.
Wow. And I love what you said because it is something we hear all the time like, oh, this runs in my family. Oh, you're just getting older. Oh, and it's like, well, wait a second. Is that the case, or are there choices and decisions that we can make differently? So you talked about motherhood and how, you had 3 kids at like under 2. I mean, that's Criss, you don't have to be an overachiever in everything. You know what I mean? That's a lot. That's a lot when there's not medical issues. I mean, that's, twins and a little one, that would have been a lot to deal with on a day-to-day basis. But then on top of it, you had the medical issues. You became the spokesperson for your children. And so it was not just take care of them and the typical day-to-day, feed them, keep them alive, like is so necessary when they're that age. But I have to make sure that people are listening and paying attention and giving them what they need and what's best for them day in and day out in a system that is often like, I'm here and I know better than you and you're going to do what I tell you. And you were like, no, actually, I'm going to research. I'm going to figure out what this looks like for my children. So a lot of women, a lot of conversations are not had about the less romantic side of motherhood. There's the fantasy and then there's real life. What helped you in terms of the demands, the needs, the exhaustion? What helped you in motherhood? When do you think, or what do you think helped you kind of turn a corner in that? Or what would you offer to others who are like, I'm drowning in motherhood right now? And it's not, no one thinks it's okay to say that. Where do we go with that?
Oh my goodness. That's a layered question, but I'm going to say for anyone who is feeling like they're losing themselves, let's just say in motherhood, in this example, I would try to identify, or I would tell them to try to identify when those feelings began, right? When you began to feel lost, disconnected, And then just pause for a moment and give that version of yourself a big hug, because you were doing the best that you could in that moment of time. And we have to remember that sometimes, things happen because you don't have the knowledge to navigate it in a manner that would produce a different outcome. And that right there specifically, I love, and it's not something that I'm just making up. It's actually a quote from Peter Crone. And that resonates with me because the fact that you didn't have the knowledge to navigate it in any other way than how you did is what led you to feeling lost. And so for me, motherhood was always like a sprint. I just had to keep going. There was no pausing. There was such a high demand for our attention, not just mine, but my husband's. And at that time, I was working full time. He was working part time. That worked for our family. We were both going through our own journeys in our own silent, in our own ways, fighting our silent battles. So for anyone who is feeling lost in whatever journey, just pause, right? And recognize that you're not alone, because many times we are, or we try to do it alone. I did it alone. When I say I did it alone, I didn't have a support. I guess I had a very strong support system, but not a mental support system, if that even makes sense. Like, I didn't have someone that was going through what I was going through to bounce back from. It was a very lonely journey, because we are very, very fortunate with our daughters who have this diagnosis, who are beating the odds of most children with that diagnosis. So I found myself in this middle path of almost like, what are you even complaining about? Look how good your daughters are doing. But also don't belong over here, because they're not like your average child that age. They're not walking. They're not talking. They're not doing the activities that others are. So I couldn't go to this side because you don't quite fit in, but you can't quite fit in over here, because what are you complaining about, right? And no one ever told me, what are you complaining about? I think those are just things that our mind just kind of talks to us sometimes, and we make shit up.
Right.
But but it was a lonely journey.
Yeah.
And so many women navigate that. So as soon as you begin to feel that something is out of alignment, just pause. And the key is to go back and try to identify when those feelings began, and give yourself some grace, because everybody is doing the best they can with the version and the things that they have available to them at that moment. But it doesn't mean that can't change. But you have to be open to it, and you have to be ready to receive and to do the work. And that's what most people are not open to. Most people don't want to do the hard work.
So true. And I think you bring up a good point. I think most mothers do go through the challenges alone, don't necessarily seek out the support, the resources that they could. And I think a big part of it is embarrassment. Like, I should be able to handle this. I should know what I'm doing. It's my children. Like, I should just have been able to figure out and intuitively know everything to do. What did asking for help or doing the work look like for you?
Honestly, it was recognizing that I wasn't a version of myself that I loved. I didn't love myself. I didn't even know what that looked like. And I remember the day that I made the decision to work with a coach. And at that point, I had never done anything like that. But I knew that was the next step.
Mm.
And I remember going to my husband, not to ask for permission to do this, because at that point it was, me
You were doing it.
investing more than I'd ever invested in a coach, which, my husband wasn't familiar with what that was. But I went to him and I said, look, we are doing such an amazing job with our children, especially advocating for our girls, where we know how to do this, right? We have envisioned the life that we desire for our children, for our daughters with all these medical needs, and things are happening. There are moments where we have no idea where we're going to get the money to pay $10,000 for vision therapy, another multiple thousands of dollars for therapeutic horseback riding. I said, but we've never questioned it. We make a decision and we go with it, and the money arrives. And it's always happened. And we never even for a minute think about what we're going to do. We know what we want for them. We make the decision and we make it happen. I said, so now it's time that we adopt that for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We know how to do it.
I want to pause right here because you bring up such a good point, Criss. I have often said, I wish I had a business that sold stuff for kids, because parents will spend any amount of money on their kids. We know this. We've seen this. We've done it, right? However, especially mothers, I will say, when it comes to them investing this to the same degree in themselves, it rarely happens. I mean, what you just described, so few women go, listen, we have done this for our kids without hesitation, without question. We have done it in full faith and full conviction. Very few women have done that for themselves and said, I am going to invest heavily in me now. And this is the thing that's interesting with motherhood. I know that I did it for a while. I watched lots of women do this. They think that being a better mom is pouring more into the kids, when being a better mom is pouring more into themselves.
1000%.
So you laid it out and you went for it.
And I went for it. And I have not stopped investing in myself since then. And that was, oh gosh, I don't even remember. We're in 2025 now, a few years back. But it's interesting. And I have to mention this because it all just kind of comes together, Monique. Yesterday, you sent me a message that was kind of a reminder. You said, oh, just a reminder, and I forgot exactly how it was worded, but you basically said, this is actually the new year, right? And I forgot how you worded it. It's not like January 1st, but this is actually the new year. And I remember telling you, it's interesting you say that, because a lot of things in my life have happened specifically the last week of March.
Mm.
And I love Facebook memories because it brings you to them, right? But since we're talking about investing in ourselves, I invested in that particular coach. And then months later, I did the next highest investment, which had my legs shaking. And when I connect the dots looking back, that specific investment is what led me to meeting you, Monique. Story for another day. But one of my Facebook memories this week was 2 years ago, when I made the largest investment I had ever made into myself. That if I were to share it with people, some would think I'm crazy if they're not used to that. That particular time, I made sure I got my husband's buy-in. That when I sort of asked for permission, I was like, I think this is next, but I don't want to keep dreaming by myself. I said, I want us to dream together. And so he agreed to that investment. And it's crazy because that particular investment is what allowed me to do a significant shift that led to me leaving corporate. That investment is the one that did a significant shift for my husband, who is a completely different man today, right?
Mm.
And if we wouldn't have done it, we would not be having and experiencing the best time of our life today, because we are returning to who we really are.
Yeah.
But it's, a process.
Yeah,
It's a
is.
process.
You, when you bring that up, it reminds me of this is the only way that you could have left corporate is if you did that internal work, if you had an identity shift, if you could say, this is actually not who I am, this is actually not what I want, and this is it. When you were, and when other people are sitting on that edge of leaving what they've known, leaving the paycheck or the benefits or the title, or, oh my gosh, I put so many years into this career. What's the biggest, scariest thing that you face in that moment? What was it for you?
Okay, this is going to sound funny, but I was not scared.
Oh, I love it. You were ready.
And I laugh because looking back, could appear of it being the craziest decision of my life. Because you have to remember, I was the breadwinner.
Yeah.
I was the one with the full-time corporate secure job, making, 6 figures. My husband was working part-time, an hourly part-time job, because he was the one attending to the family.
Yep.
And when I walked away, it was a mutual decision. He's like, Criss, you're the one that's always worried about the money. It's going to work out because that's the way it's going to be. So I don't recommend it to anyone to just walk away like that, right?
Yeah, I get it. I get
it. So yes, we had a financial plan, but it was more of a deep knowing. That's what it was. A knowing that it was my time to move and to pivot and to transition into this next iteration of me. And the beautiful thing was, we did that transition. My husband in a part-time job. And in less than a month, he was offered a position, full-time, full benefits. And when I say full benefits, it's 0 out of his paycheck, covered 100%, which is ideal for our family's medical needs. And it just aligned. It aligned in every way possible. And that wasn't even something that was entertained. He left a position that he was in for 24 years.
Wow.
Overnight. And every decision and every transition after that has only helped us evolve into the person that we are today. And everything that we're going through, all of this, I don't know, it's like this becoming and this unlearning and this, I don't know, what can I even say? Because it's like, it's becoming, it's shedding, it's unlearning, and it's remembering who we are.
Yeah.
Right? And I know I am very, very lucky to have a husband who has never questioned anything that I'm doing. I mean, I've had some pretty wild ideas, right? In terms of what we should do next. But he's always supported me. And the fact that he made that choice along with me 2 years ago to say yes. And I remember him telling me, well, if you can't beat him, join him. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He says, I am tired of living this way and feeling these things. And I didn't know he'd been doing the work silently. He was doing the work. And when he said that, it's like this whole other world opened up for the two of us. Because now you're doing it together. Now you're vibrating at that same frequency. Now things are elevating. And the beautiful part is that our children can see that. Now
Yeah.
they're not seeing two parents that are exhausted and tired and, grumpy. They're seeing a version of us that we hope they can learn from. And I say hope because they're still young and, there's their journey that they have to go through.
Yeah. One of the things that's always stood out to me about you, Criss, is your ability to trust the unknown, to go for it even when there's no guarantees. And this is what a lot of people can't do. It's like, I won't do that if I don't know that this for sure will happen in this way. How have you exercised this? How have you mastered this ability to trust?
God speaking to me.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't always like this, trust me. I was very rigid, and I think like most people, we have this idea and we want to know exactly how every step is going to unfold. Because if I don't know exactly how it's going to unfold and I don't have that planned, then I don't feel safe enough to take that step. And that was part of the unlearning, part of the rewiring, letting go of programming and limiting beliefs that were no longer serving, right?
Yep.
But I had to learn to trust the process. And that began the day that I heard God speaking to me very clearly. And it was an incredible experience. And I only began to trust when I saw those messages unfolding as they were being delivered to me. And some not making sense at all. But over time, it was like, oh, I see it. And so that allowed me to just open up this whole new channel of trusting and believing and just knowing. And this is what I say, you can't do it if you don't have a deep knowing. And that in itself is a trust walk. And, I was told that I was going to get very uncomfortable. God said he was going to push me and get me very uncomfortable before I got to that next step. And so it's just been a journey.
And that's part of it, right? There's no growth without the discomfort, without the unknown. It's just not going to happen. I think everything you're describing, this is evolving as a human being. And we don't evolve, we don't grow if everything is as it's always been. And if everything is just perfectly comfortable and makes total sense and is predictable, they just don't go together. And I think that this is also what helps you so much in all the things you do, because you're a mentor, you're an advisor, you're a publishing partner. You do lots of. It's not even that you do lots of things. It's that you bring a lot to the table in what you do now. And I know that obviously everything led you to this. Everything challenging, easy, happy, horrible, all of it built you for this. And I'd love for you to talk about, you held space in HR. How do you hold space now for people to be able to be who they're meant to be and to be able to share their story? And what does that look like today?
Yeah. So, you said it, right? We just talked about it, going through this journey of becoming and shedding and remembering, it wasn't a single moment, but a collection of experiences that broke me open, rebuilt me with intention, right? Mm-hmm. So having worked those 20 years in corporate HR, is what, I learned how to lead and listen and guide and all those things. But it wasn't until I found myself just lost in motherhood that it allowed me to really understand what it meant to hold space for someone, because I was forced to hold space for myself. Okay? And then navigating, that burnout, that health crisis, and that just unraveling of who I thought I had to be, then gave me the empathy and the wisdom to bring that into every role that I do. So being a mentor is just something that comes naturally because that's what I've been for so long. But once I healed and I started helping other women find themselves again, so that's how I was able to see how women longed to just be seen and to be heard, right? And how I realized that storytelling was the key to unlocking their power, just like it was for me. Because I always shared my journey in motherhood. I was never quiet. I was never shy. I shared it with the world because that was part of what I was supposed to do, apparently. I don't know. Right. So then not only do I draw from my lived experiences, I draw from my professional background as well and just offer that guidance, intuitive guidance, if you will, that just helps women move forward without losing themselves, right? So all these roles are not separate, right? They're extensions of the same purpose, right? Which is to help women reclaim their voice and own their truth and lead with authenticity. But I had to go through a journey myself to be able to see how everything beautifully comes together, how supporting people in one area allows me to support people in others. So it's just been this this evolution that has gotten me to this place today. And every person is unique and every person has their own needs and desires, but having that collection of experiences allows me to support everyone and meet them where they need to be met.
Yeah, absolutely. Criss, I would love for you to share where people can, connect with you, how they can work with you.
Yeah, so it's pretty easy. My name, Criss Madrigal. I'm in all the social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and it's my name, Criss Madrigal, Criss, just like it's written there on the screen. And I'm just a DM away. I'd love to hear from anyone, especially women. If this connection, if this just kind of connected with you in any way, I'd love to hear your story. Whether you're someone in corporate who is struggling, with motherhood or just not feeling aligned, let's have those conversations because that's what it is today. It's about connection, it's about conversations, and it's about allowing people to feel seen and heard.
Absolutely. Criss, thank you so much for taking the time to be here with me and for sharing your journey, your ups and downs, and also thank you for showing up as who you are today. This beautiful, magnetic leader who has the biggest heart. Thank you so much for bringing that for all of us.
Thank you, Monique.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you would like to share your story on this, reach out to me and I can get you the application. And if you'd like to share your story in one of our upcoming books, we can do that as well. This is what I want you to remember. The story that built you, that's the one that needs to be told. Until next time, have a wonderful day.